Hi, I'm Father Joel, and welcome to Pilgrim Priest. If this is your first time tuning into the podcast, thank you. I want to do a quick shout out to the people of Duluth and Bishop Felton. I had a great visit there last month and a wonderful rosary. Prayed at Our Lady of the Rosary with some very welcoming people. Thank you, Bishop, and thank you to the people of Duluth. God bless you. So today we celebrate the Assumption of Mary into heaven. It's a mystery that's not found in the Bible, but comes down to us from the tradition. There is no tomb of Mary. You can't go and visit a tomb of Mary. And the reason is because Mary went actually to live with John, Jesus' youngest disciple, and they wound up in Ephesus, which is where the home of Mary was until she died. And her funeral was in Ephesus, but someone was very late, missed the funeral. We think it was Thomas the Apostle. Remember that Thomas went farther than any other apostle. He went as far as southern India. And so if Thomas was on his way back, perhaps for the funeral, and wasn't there in time, so he asked for them to open the tomb so that he could see the body and pay his respects. And when they did, the tomb was found to be empty, with nothing but flowers there. And so the tradition is that Mary was assumed into heaven, that Jesus took his mother's body up into heaven, reunited body and soul, so that the resurrection that we'll experience at the end of time, where our bodies and souls are put back together again, Mary has already experienced now. She's experiencing it. Just as Jesus rose from the dead, his body and soul were reunited on Easter Sunday morning. So in a similar way, that same mystery has already happened to Mary. And so it's a sign of what we will be called to. Well, why would God do this? Well, of course, it makes sense that Jesus would want his mother with him in heaven. But it also makes sense because her body was the one that bore Jesus, that gave him his human nature. That body itself, which was never subject to sin during her lifetime, should not be subject to the corruption of decomposition after death. And even there are a great number of saints whose bodies have been found to be incorrupt, and even decades and centuries after their death are still pliable. Rigor mortis hasn't even set in yet. Definitely worth doing research on the incorruptibles. There's many of them, including St. John Vianney, St. Catherine Labouré, the visionary who received the miraculous medal. But these are signs to us of God's salvation already working out. Now, none of those have been assumed into heaven. The bodies, we know where they are. It's just that they haven't decomposed. They've been incorrupt. Even St. Anthony, his tongue was found to be incorrupt. So definitely worth a Google, as they say. But also, the Bible makes the case that Mary is the Ark of the Covenant. Now, when we say Ark, we usually think of Noah's Ark, that big boat that saved all the animals. But there's another ark in the Old Testament, and that's the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant was a large wooden box that was had poles running through the sides, that was then carried on the shoulders of the priests. And this wooden box had two angels on the top gazing inwards, but the center, where you would expect to find like a great statue, was empty, because the Jews didn't make images of God in order to prevent falling into idolatry. Instead, the box contained God moments when the Israelites had encountered God. So it contained a jar of the manna that had fed them in the desert. It contained the 10 Commandments that the Bible says were written by the very hand of God, so the stone tablets on which Moses had received the law. And it contained Aaron's rod. Aaron is Moses' brother. He and his sons were the priests at that time. And at one point, his priesthood was challenged by others who felt they were more deserving. And so Aaron and these other guys had a sort of a Old Testament throwdown. They put their staves in the ground, stuck them up in the ground, and the next morning, Aaron's staff had budded and was producing ripe olives and ripe almonds. Olives would be cool too. So that was a sign that was meant to be a miraculous sign that God was blessing the people through Aaron, that his priesthood was fruitful, right? That God was conferring. So the ark contained these three symbols of God's presence, where they had noticed God, and they carried it with them through the desert, and it actually led them into the promised land. So when they got to the Jordan River, finally after 40 years of wandering in the desert, it was springtime, and the Jordan was overflowing its banks, but the priests walked into the river carrying the ark, and the river stopped flowing, and then the entire nation of Israel was able to walk through on dry ground. And then they went and fought the Battle of Jericho. That's the story there. So the ark brings them into the promised land. The ark kind of hung around in various locations until David made Jerusalem the capital city, and then Solomon built the temple, and the ark sat in the Holy of Holies of the temple. And it was there until the Babylonian captivity. When that temple was destroyed, the ark went missing and has never been found again. Now, Indiana Jones may or may not be true. But seriously, archaeologists, that's not a pun, have not found the ark. Well, we believe that Christians have found the ark, and the ark is none other than Mary herself. And so in the first reading, it talks about how this vision, this is Revelation 12, or 11, verse 19, God's temple in heaven was opened, and the ark of his covenant could be seen in the temple. And then it goes on to talk about the woman clothed with the sun, with the moon beneath her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. When Mary welcomes Christ into her womb, Mary becomes the ark of the covenant, because she is the meeting place between heaven and earth. The top of the ark, that empty space, was called the mercy seat. And it was thought that when God came down to earth, that was his landing pad. That was his sort of helicopter pad for God's descent. And so this was the meeting place between heaven and earth. But Mary has become the meeting place between heaven and earth. And she carries in her womb the bread of life. Not the manna, but the foreshadowing of the Eucharist. She carries in her womb the true lawgiver. Not the law written on tablets, but the one who gave the law to Moses on Mount Sinai. And she carries in her womb the high priest, the true priesthood. Not a symbol of Aaron's priesthood, but the actual true priest, of which Aaron and Melchizedek and every other priest is a foreshadowing. And even priests today share in Jesus' one priesthood. We don't have a new priesthood. And so Mary is this ark of the covenant that sort of helps bring us into the promised land of heaven. When David makes the temple, he brings the ark to the temple, right? So when Jesus ascends up to heaven and takes his seat at the right hand of the Father, he then brings his ark into the temple with him. So you can see how the Assumption of Mary is very fitting and appropriate when you understand Mary's role, that the ark was actually a foreshadowing. It was actually a symbol of the true ark that God was preparing, which is Mary herself. So what can we learn from these lessons? Well, I think there's two things that we can draw from this. The first is that, remember, the ark saves these three instances when the Jews had seen God, had noticed God's power in their life. And I think it's really important for us to preserve moments when we have seen God working in our life. For many of us, we've had a surprising answer to prayer, a time when things seemed hopeless, we trusted in God, and then all of a sudden things opened up in the most natural way possible, and yet in a way that we could not have predicted. We need to save those moments. We need to remember where God has been in our life, and we need to preserve memories. We need even symbols. It might be important for us to have a particular symbol that reminds us of the ways that God has answered our prayers, the places that God has been in our life. Just like the Israelites preserve the manna, the Ten Commandments, and the staff of Aaron, so we need to be preserving moments where we see God in our life. Otherwise, when we face a new crisis, a new challenge, a new difficulty, we can wonder, where is God? Well, we know he's going to work this one out because he worked all the rest of them out, right? But I think it's really important for us to be able to go back and to remind ourselves how God has been present in our life. The second thing we notice is that in today's reading, Mary has discovered who she is in the coming of Christ, in the incarnation. And from that place, Mary is then going to Elizabeth to greet her, to share the gift that Mary has received. And we realize that Mary and Elizabeth are both living their roles within God's great plan, within God's great drama, if you will, the great play of the love of God between heaven and earth. And the temptation that I think we all fall into is to try to make ourselves the center of our own life. It seems reasonable, right? Like when I look out at the world, everybody's looking back at me. I appear to be the center of my own little universe, right? And that's how a 3-year-old sees the world, right? Give it to me, it's mine. Don't take it from me. Why should I share? I don't want to share. I got it first. No, and I want your thing too, right? This is how 3-year-olds see the world. But grown-ups aren't that much better. We've just got more sophisticated at hiding it, you know? My right. I deserve this. You owe it to me. Didn't we agree? Right? We tend to think of ourselves as the center of our own little universe. From that place, the world is an incredibly frustrating thing because the world doesn't care about your puny will, but also everybody else is an annoyance or an opportunity to get what I want. And we end up living selfish lives when we make ourselves the center of the universe. Well, the way that God designed the universe is we're all part of this fantastic, beautiful play. We're all playing a special, unique role that only we can play, but we're not the center of the story. The center of the story is Jesus and his mother Mary and the work that the Trinity is doing in us and through us. That's the heart of the story. And when we recognize our true role in relationship to Christ, when we allow him to be the star of the play, then we find our special spot. Not having to be the center, not having to be the most important, not having to hide either, but really shining in the way that we were created to shine. Bishop Barron refers to this as the Theo-drama, and he says that we need to get out of our ego dramas and realize that we're part of a Theo-drama. So in her relationship with Jesus, Mary discovers her true role. In her relationship with Jesus, Elizabeth discovers her true role. And then these two women are not competing with each other, but rather supporting each other in living their roles well. And that's the truth, is that when we discover our true role in relationship to Christ, then we don't have to compete with anyone else, because no one can do our job and we can't do theirs. Rather, we can support them in living their role in the play, in the great Theo-drama. And so this, I think, is a beautiful unfolding of what we see in the Assumption of Mary, is that we celebrate the way that Mary lived her role well, and God gave her a very special role, okay? Best Supporting Actress in the Theo-drama, that's a really important role, right? Mary lived her role well precisely by being humble, by not being afraid to be one of the lowly ones and allowing God to lift up the lowly, by not trying to be one of the mighty who would be cast down from their thrones, or one of the proud that God would scatter in their conceit. Mary is humbly doing her role, and in doing so, God exalts her. So in a similar way, we're each invited to a humble discovery of our role in the Theo-drama, and realizing that when we choose to humbly obey the director, when we choose to listen to the Holy Spirit, and to allow God to show us the place he has for us, and for us to live that role incredibly well, that not only lifts us up, but it lifts everyone else up too. Today we celebrate the Ark of the Covenant, Mary, who was not afraid to be humble, to play her little role in the great Theo-drama, which turned out to be a very big part. Let's not be afraid to play our little role, because we never know how important that role might be.